In September of 2023, over 38,000 people were displaced across the Volta Basin as controlled spillage from the Akosombo and Pond dams unleashed one of Ghana's worst modern flood disasters. Homes were submerged, schools, clinics, and entire livelihoods washed away. In the weeks that followed, anger rose as state institutions had delayed warnings, as shelters that were not ready, and at questions that went unanswered. To uncover what went wrong and what must change, the new John Mahama-led administration commissioned a 5-member technical committee to investigate the spillage and its consequences. In this edition of Hot Issues, we interrogate the committee's dominant report, which describes institutional breakdowns, gaps in preparedness, and a strong call for compensation and reforms. I am Kemini Amano, and I sit down with a man who chaired the inquiry. He's also a former chief executive of the Volta River Authority and a lead author of the Akosombo Spillage report. We'll ask him what really happened, who should be held accountable, and whether Ghana is ready for the next disaster. My next guest is engineer Kirk. You're welcome to Hot Issues. When you go through the report, it would appear there is the worst justification for the spillages. But then it also raises the question as to whether or not it was done at the right time. Yeah. What did your inquiry find?
Okay, thank you very much, Kemni. Let me just start by saying that I'm privileged to be here to talk to the nation about what went on and then what our findings was and how to prevent future occurrences. Let me also start by thanking our President Mahama, who is able leadership and visionary in thinking about the nation to set up this committee on an event which happened when he wasn't in power. And I must say that when he set up this, he also added a warning that in future, should it happen again, somebody will be held responsible. And I think it was very, very right to say that, knowing that he knows who is going to put there to take care of the dam. The dam is the heart of this nation. I already answered the question straight as to who could be blamed today. I will just come up with a small analysis, and then from there, we can all deduce as to what it is. But then, realizing the importance of this dam to the nation, you always want to make sure the right thing is done. And that's why our president said we should go into this thing and then make sure we find out what went wrong and make sure it doesn't happen again. Right. Akosombo was finished in 65, started operation in 1966. Since 66, we have 4 machines. By 72, we added on 2 more machines, coming to 6 machines. But it will interest you to know that when the plant was built, way back in 1966, there was spillage in 66, spillage in 67, spillage in 68, which was the highest so far on record, 68. The spillage in 68, in terms of magnitude, was 5 times what was spilled in 2023. Okay, in terms of magnitude. And in terms of flow, twice what was done in 2023. 69, there was spillage. 70, there was spillage. 71, there was spillage. 72, there was spillage. No spillage in 73. Then 74, there was spillage. Then a long break. Then 1982, 83, we went to the lowest level. I mean, I was a young engineer then. From the lowest level, I'm just saying this for us to have an idea of the lake that we are operating. Right. So we went to the lowest level in 82, 83. That was below 240. Then 1991, there was spillage. And in the case of the dam, it's only the inflow, rainfall, which brings water into the lake. So there was spillage in 1991. From 91, there was no spillage. Then we went to the lowest ever level in 2007. That's I think I was the director of operations there. 2007, when we went below 235.00, we went to 234.97, lowest ever. There was confusion in the whole country as to what was going to happen and whatever. But we were able to sail through. And that was in 2007.
Right.
2010, 3 years after that, 3 years, only 3 years, we went to 2010 and then we had to spill. From the minimum ever to the highest ever, it went to 277.54 in that year. So you can see a lake which can go to the minimum and within 3 years come to the maximum.
Right.
In 2010, the inflow that year alone was about 22 feet, highest.
Okay.
Okay, so then we spill. From 2010, I didn't know till I was giving the exercise that we went to the lowest again, 235 in 2017. I wasn't in office then.
Right.
So 2017, we went to the lowest. But in 2023, we went to the highest again and we had to spill. And they spilled in 2023. I'm saying all this is that this lake which level goes up and down and it's all as a result of inflow. And all this inflow varies at too many considerations. Now, when Akosombo was built, the unit, water which goes through the unit to generate electricity, the quantum, we can say is 50,000 CFS, cubic feet per second. That's the volume of water which goes through the machines.
Right.
Now, we have spillway gates which were built together with the plant. When you are building a dam, you know definitely one day there will be spillage. The spillway gates were built as part of the plant, and it cost a lot of money to build those spillway gates. So those spillway gates were built in 1960 when the plant was built. And you know how much the spillway gates can discharge? More than 10 or 20 times what the plant takes out.
Okay.
So you know that when you are building this plant, you have spillway gates which can discharge so much. That means you know that one day, there will be that much discharge. So then adequate preparation should be made for that. Did we make those adequate preparations since the plant was built in 1965, 67, 65 till date? Did we? I'm coming. Then Pond Dam 2 was built downstream of Akosombo.
Right.
Similar arrangement because it's downstream of Akosombo. The plant was built, commissioned in 82. Similar spillway gates were put there. So we had all these things and we had all these spillway gates, knowing that one day we will. And that one day we spilled in 68, which was a large volume. We never saw anything. But of course, the population in the country downstream was nothing, was so small at that time. But we have run this plant all these years. Did we manage the downstream area very well during that period?
What do you think?
Did we?
I mean, based on your inquiry, do you think that?
Probably not. Probably not. Did we? Probably not. Upstream, there's an LI which shows that you can't operate within, you can't put up any structure below elevation 280. There's an LI. That I know VR has done something. As to whether that's also been enforced properly, I'm not too sure. Going forward, some of these recommendations have been taken on board and I hope they'll be addressed. Yeah. So upstream, there's an LI which shows that some area cannot be, you can't put any permanent structure. Right. Upstream.
So engineer, moving a little faster than, yes, I'd want us to go. Let's come back to the question as to whether or not the spillage was done appropriately.
I'll come back to that very soon. So in the case of downstream, there's no LI. We have people living, they could live anywhere within the floods zone. Now, in 2023, early part of the year, that's in May, VRA carried out what they call it Daunso, a drill, which was not a paper top drill, a proper drill, simulation as to what could happen if there's a spillage. Right. Okay? Now, prior to that, in 2010, Ryan Hoskonen also helped VRA come up with what we call emergency preparedness plan in 2010, which have been with VRA. And the emergency preparedness plan is just to assist the management when there is a spillage. Which area will be dominated, which people will be affected, and how to manage it. The protocol on how to manage all these things. So this thing has been with VRA since 2011. But then every year they do a desktop preparation to say, if it happens, we'll do this. And there are a number of stakeholders involved in this exercise.
All right, so hang on. I want us to separate the issue of the spillage from the floods that took place after the spillage.
Okay.
So let's deal with the spillage. Now, the dam had excess water.
That is it.
And the dam operators needed to prevent overtopping, right? When they did it, at the time they did it, was it done correctly? Was it done timeously? What did your inquiry find?
The dam water levels, normally take, as I said, whatever comes into the lake is as a result of the rainfall. In 2023, what we found out was that from the forecast, that year was going to be, the inflow was going to be below average.
Right.
Which did not necessitate any high level for that matter you would not spill. Okay, but along the line, things keep on changing. Okay, so in August, in July, it was average to below average. In August, then it changed. Just before September, they realized that no, all this information from Meteo, ACMAD, and whatever, there are no of agents who have VRA predict the inflow. I mean, this is something like nature. So when they realized there was going to be above average inflow, then that's where they initiated the move to spill. So when they realized in first September that no, this could be above an average year, they started warning everybody, started warning from the beginning to the 8th, and then by the 15th, when the level was 272.4, they started spillage. And then they started with volumes that could be manageable. And that's in the emergency preparedness plan, that's like phase 1. And that was started on the 15th. So let me say from the 15th, they started 20,000 CFS, went to 20, went to 40, went to 50, gradually to 70. But then what happened was that come October, the inflow went up. Normally for the lake, over the years, you get your inflow and the inflow peaks in middle of September or by the end of September, it would have peaked. If you make it, you would have had your maximum and start coming down. But it come the 10th, 11th of October, VI noticed a spike. That the level, the inflow, the amount of water coming in was a bit too much than it could contain. Okay, so that necessitated a bigger spill? A bigger spill.
Okay.
But they have started the spilling since the 15th.
15th of September.
And nobody was affected. From the 15th that they spilled up to the 10th, 11th of October, they were spilling all right because the volumes were below 100,000 CFS.
All right. So let's run it back again.
Yes.
Right? In July, when they had noticed or got information that, look, we're going to get a lot of water.
No, that was in late August.
Late August.
July, no, you are going to get average or no average. So it keep on coming every time. So
there are those who have explained that the reason the VRA did not ensure that the dam spilled it early enough is because of political interference at the time. Did you find that in your work?
No, and never. Let me tell you something. If those who have to take the decision to spill live downstream of the plant, and one thing I want to tell everybody: the dam is a resource, is a treasure to this nation. Nobody would want to take any decision to compromise on the dam. The dam is the most important facility we have there. Now, if they have to take any decision, your decision will be to prevent breaching on the dam. Because when you breach the dam, or when it topples, everything will go. And then whatever you are trying to prevent, downstream, everybody will be washed away. So the dam is your number one thing to prevent from water overtopping it. Okay? So any decision you take, you have that at the mark of your mind. But of course, you don't also want to also spill water when you don't have to. And let me tell you, I've sat in our office before. I've run the plant all my life. I haven't worked anywhere except VRA. Nobody can interfere in any decision as to when to spill or not to spill. That I can tell you. But I don't think there was any interference in that.
I see. So it wasn't the case that, there was political pressure for the VRA not to spill the water at the time because, we had power crisis, some level of power crisis. Our thermal plants were not producing. We also had gas supply challenges at the time. And so hydro was, the savior of the energy, in terms of power generation at the time. And so the conclusion drawn by many is that there was political pressure to ensure that we kept the water in the dam to be able to produce hydroelectric.
No. At above 270, you have more than we even need anyway. If you go into record, we also saw into record that VRA has been generating far more than necessary, far more than they should from the hydro. Probably the water was there, so they should far more above the firm energy, which is 5,600 or even a long-term average. Far more. All the generations from have been above 6,000. Some year 2023, they went to 8,000, 7,000, 6,600. So the generation from hydro has been very, very consistently very, very high. That's dangerous. We also do that because there's implication to that. So nobody could have. And they started spilling on the 15th, all right. But come October 11th, when they have to increase, because then the normal trend of inflow, which would have shown a gradual reduction in October, peaked. So when it peaks in October, they also have to increase the flow, increase the spillage.
Indeed. I want to read what Imani Ghana said in that report when you interviewed Koffi Bentil. He said that the Volta River Authority possessed sufficient meteorological and hydrological data to anticipate and manage the water levels, but failed to act appropriately. Now, your report goes on to say, according to him, internal information suggested that political directives from national security and the presidency at the time influenced VRA's operational decisions. Now, I want us to focus on the first part. The fact that VRA possessed sufficient meteorological and hydrological data to anticipate and manage the water flow or the water levels. That is true. Because you have also mentioned that the VRA was working with Ghana Meteo before for the information on the rains, and Ghana Meteo is even able to predict how much rain is likely to come within that a certain period. And so then the engineers who watch the dam should have done their engineering math to figure out whether or not they would have to spill earlier, later, and how much water they should be spilling at each point in time. Don't you agree?
I agree with you to an extent. The spillage was started on the 15th. And almost a month, almost close to a month, before they realized a sudden surge of inflow. That was not normal. Picking in October was not normal. And I said I've run the place before. So that sudden picking in October alarmed them. And of course, the best for you to do at that time is save the dam.
But was it really sudden peaking? If they were working with Ghana Meteo?
No. Your normal picking, I mean, it follows a normal trend. Your normal picking is late September. So when it peaks, you expect it to follow a particular trend. But then when it did not follow a particular trend, then you have to be careful. And that's why they have to increase the spillage from, I think it was about 100. If they spill around 100,000 CFS, no problem. But then that's why they have to increase to 180. And that's what caused the challenge.
I see.
Yes.
So would you describe this as a climate event or a failure of leadership?
No, it's a climate event, to be honest with you. This is not failure of climate event. Because normally, you hardly get that level of inflow around October. Picking in October, no. But then, they started from early September. If you go to our history of all this spillage over the years, most spillage were like 2010. Spillage was in November or late October. Okay, it comes gradually and then goes up. And as I said, there's always a fine line between spilling and not spilling. Because you want to be careful, you don't go and throw away water, what would it be used for generating, and you throw away and then the water stops. In 2010, for instance, when we had to spill, 2010, or 1991, I was a young engineer then, we started spilling, and within 4 or 5 days, we realized our projection of inflow was not according to projected. So we have to stop spilling. Okay, so it does happen. You project some level of inflow. You could go by that trend, or it could reduce. So there'll be a number of instances where you project, you see the inflow, you go along the line. And if you watch carefully, even when the inflow, when it started, went up, came down a little bit, because you are monitoring how much water is coming in. So it starts, it goes up, and then it comes down, and then when it became too much, they have to open.
So the VRA cannot be held accountable for the nature and manner of the spillage. Now, I'm not talking about the floods. Let's focus on the spillage.
No, I only want to blame them too much for the levels. Of course, on the hand side, you could have said that, if I knew there was so much water coming in October, let me start from 100 from day one and go ahead.
But I mean, so that's what I'm saying. Yes. They could have known, because one, they have the technology to be able to do that. They have the gauges along the system to be able to tell, once they have received their weather information and how much rain is likely to fall. But you asked them about it. What did they tell you about their gauges?
No, but you see, you have gauges. Direct impact rainfall onto the lake itself. You can't always predict that. You can't 100% predict that. You can't. And that's what caused the extra spillage, but not the spillage. Of course, if they had waited till probably October, then I would have blamed them. But then, of course, they started early, the inflow pattern changed, and then they have to spill a bit more to save the dam, which I think was the right decision.
What were the technological challenges for the VRA when it came to measuring the water levels?
What we also found out was that, well, we have tributaries, the Oti, White Water, Black Water, and Nauni. We have all these gauges on these things where it's able to give them some idea of how much water is coming in. But of course, the direct rainfall which falls on the lake, this is a very huge lake. It's not easy to measure. What we've also noticed was that going forward, they might have to increase the gauging stations. Going forward, they might have to be a bit automated. And I think they are working with Water Resources Commission to make sure some of these things are adhered to. And going forward, probably with AI and modern technology, well, there could be a bit more accurate prediction of how much rainfall will come in at any particular time. But that is not, it cannot be 100% accurate. And going forward, I mean, as you see from our report, this is some of the recommendations we come up with.
I see. And we'll look at the recommendations. Let's stay on the matter with the VRA, because when I read the report, I know that the inquiry had asked the VRA the situation with one of their gauges, and it indicated that the gauge was there but was not being applied appropriately.
Oh, well.
I'm trying to get into that.
No, there are a number of gauging stations.
Okay,
so one gauge not applying properly would not significantly impact on this. It's just like saying spillage from Burkina Faso impacts so much on this. No, it doesn't work that way. Direct inflow, because whatever it is, we have gauges which are close to the plant, which also give you an accurate inflow of water every day into the lake.
So that one incident couldn't have changed anything?
No.
Okay. Now let's move away from that and also talk about the kinds of responses you got from VRA. Because again, when you read the report, it would appear that the VRA, and I'm talking about the flooding, the VRA consistently pushes blame on NADMO. Shouldn't the VRA also see its responsibility in the floods that occurred after the spillage?
Definitely.
Then why is it that in this report it would appear that they are shifting all the blame to NADMO?
When it comes to the flooding, this one goes into the flooding, not the spillage. Goes to the flooding downstream. Upstream, that's a different issue. Going to the flooding downstream. Downstream, as I said, VRA did a simulation, a drill in May. And I don't know whether I was going to say that probably because they did, because ever since the emergency preparedness plan was put in place, there was no drill or anything. How come 2023, when they decided to do the drill, there was a spillage? I'm sure this is different intervention, but that's at the side. They did that all right, but then when they did the drill, I'm sure they would have noticed a few challenges with the drill. The drill went excellent and went very well, and I commend them for doing that drill, because but for that drill, I'm sure the impact of the spill downstream would have been different. Even though with the volumes of water which went and no more people were displaced, nobody died. And I'm sure that success to a large extent is because of the drill. But when they did the drill, they realized, well, the district assemblies, everybody plays part. There are a number of stakeholders who play part in these emergency preparedness plan activities. The downstream district assemblies, municipal assemblies, NADMO, play a very significant role in these things. Notice they didn't have properly trained disaster management committees in the various locations. Why should that be after the event? Because when they did the drill, they should have noticed that some of these challenges were there. Probably they noticed, probably they didn't think they could spill so soon, and then they didn't take it adequately. NADMO was part of the drill. NADMO was part of the drill. They were also handicapped in sort of resources and logistics. So when it came to the actual management of the evacuation and whatever, that's where they found some challenges. There's talk of when there's movement of people, they should be taken to some safe havens. Where were the safe havens? They were not there. Classroom that we were going to move people to were classrooms without windows and whatever, no toiletry facilities. So all this, we found out that having done the drill, realized of these challenges, they should have started putting some of these things in place. Of course, they weren't there, but then when it happened, people have to struggle a few times.
But why do you think they didn't do that? Why does the committee think that this simulation exercise appears to be just routine and then everybody went home?
That was the first time they did. Why? And that's what probably lack of resources. But I think VRA together with NADMO.
No, I don't understand why you say that was the first time. The simulation exercises have been going on annually since 2011.
Desktop.
Okay.
Desktop. They come and so if they happen, they will go through the books and that's what. So 2023 May was the first time they did actual simulation where you bring the police, military, fire service, everybody involved into the exercise. And that was, I said, that's something that we can say help in the actual evacuation when the flooding came. And that's how come they never really saw any casualty. But then, of course, the management, coordination between the various stakeholders, communication, there were a few challenges which they noticed. But then going forward, all these things, they have put a lot of things in place to address it, that going forward, it doesn't happen. Also, I don't know whether we'll come back to that. There's a flood zone. I said, this dam was built way back, that one day, you might spill so much. We've seen it, not to that extent, in 68. We've seen a massive flow increase in 2010, which took out 22 feet. So anything can happen anytime. Probably that's when we should have been preparing for all these things. But then going forward, that preparation downstream where a flood zone have to be, they are aware of the flood zone. People have been encroaching all these things. So between VRA, NADMO, and the assemblies and the chiefs, make sure these flood zones are properly protected. An airline will be needed to help enforce that properly, so that nobody stays within the flood.
And that LI, we understand, based on what the former CEO told you, that LI had been forwarded to Parliament. Is that the case?
I'm not too sure of that yet.
But that's what he says.
There's an LI for upstream, but downstream, that's what has to be done. Well, the LI is something that would enforce that you do it. But then before the LI comes, nothing prevents the district assemblies, those who give the permit for people to build their houses at any location. It's up to them to make sure that enforce that nobody puts up any permanent structure within the flood zones. It's not airlines would enforce and make sure a regulation that would enforce everybody to do the right thing, but nothing prevents the assemblies from doing that.
Indeed. When we come back from our very first break, I want us to discuss the role of Water Resources Commission, because it would appear the VRA also pointed fingers at the Water Resources Commission. We'll look at some other interviews you had, for instance, with stakeholders and MPs. And when I talk about MPs, I didn't see the North Tongu MP being interviewed in this process, and I'll ask why. When I come back, we'll get that answer. Don't go away. You're here on Hot Issues live on TV3. My name is Kemini Amano. Today I'm sitting with the chairman of the Akosombo Dam Spillage Committee, Engineer Kirk Koffi. He's also a former CEO for VRA, so you can understand his depth of knowledge of the situation. Engineer, again, thank you so much for talking to us here on Hot Issues. When I look at the report, the VRA also seems to point fingers at the Water Resources Commission. What was the WRC's role in this whole situation?
The Water Resource Commission downstream, well, they are supposed to manage the water bodies.
Yeah.
There are areas where we call them creeks, which have been silted for some time now, or were grown, so that when this happened, of course, the water couldn't flow in the proper directions, and they recognize that.
So they also didn't do their jobs over the years. The job has been left undone.
Over the years. So they also recognize that then they're getting the appropriate support to make sure some of these things are also done. Yes.
And so because they were not able to clear the banks of the am I using the right terms?
Yeah, it could contribute.
Okay.
It could have contributed to some extent in the spread of the water.
Okay.
But then the volume was high. Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Did the committee find out why the WRC was also not doing its job to assist with, the VRA and their ability to manage the spillage?
Through their own presentation, I believe they've started some level of work. And as to whether, as at the time, that was adequate, I have my doubt.
Was it before or after the spillage?
Before. We've been collaborating. VRA have been saying we, because I used to work there. Water Resources have been collaborating with VRA over the years, and proper collaboration.
I see. But clearly from the report,
yes,
in the lead up to the spillage, based on what Engineer Nchidakwa had told you, the Water Resources Commission had made their work also difficult because they had not been doing much of it.
It could have contributed.
Okay.
Yeah, it could have contributed.
Yes. I see. Then you spoke with stakeholders and MPs.
Yes.
But the North Tongu MP who led advocacy for the area was not interviewed. Is there a reason why?
Yeah, Honorable Abrakwa, he did a yeoman's job. I commended him. And anywhere I went, I talked about him. I mean, we're watching him on telly every time. But unfortunately, currently the Foreign Affairs Minister is extremely busy, and it was difficult getting hold of him. But then we had gotten a lot of input. I must say, his place, the North Tongue, gave us one of the best reports. And I believe the minister was involved, from the assembly, from the chiefs, and we had a good meeting with the North Tongue people. They gave a comprehensive report in terms of people who were affected and people who have to be compensated and whatever. So even though we couldn't meet him directly, we met his people, his tribesmen, assemblymen, everybody. I've watched him several times, and I thought if we couldn't meet him because of his duties, well, that was enough for us to be able to come out with a report. But we met some other MPs and other DCs in the various locations.
Now, let's look at what some of these stakeholders said. Just a few things. They criticized the VRA's delayed response and lack of transparency, and highlighted the historical neglect of river maintenance, which we have talked about. River maintenance, which sits with the Water Resources Commission. And then dredging and bureaucratic inefficiencies that delayed emergency interventions. Based on your work, do you find this to hold truth?
The dredging, I think we're trying to make it, well, of course, if you don't understand, the purpose of the dredging is to allow salt water to come into the DC to kill Behazia, and it's not for this level of spillage. So it has been established that without the dredging, that did not in any way have any impact on the spillage. In terms of our meetings with the stakeholders downstream, of course, there's a lot of sound-winning activities downstream, and some of these sound-winning activities also affected the banks of the river, so that in that case, instead of the water staying within a confined area, find itself going into the communities. So these are some of the things that we also noticed that we have also put in our recommendation, and we are yet to meet the minister. Probably, if we are given a chance, we might have to meet some of these stakeholders again, and then explain our understanding of what we've recommended, and then what the way forward.
I see. So then the criticism that the VRA delayed in its response and the lack of transparency, do we know why the VRA delayed in responding to the flood victims?
Well, they didn't prepare properly. That's what we noticed. Because if VRA did their work and they knew there was going to be spillage, or when the spillage started early, adequate preparation should have been done. Adequate preparation in terms of logistic. But when they started the spillage for the 15th, the volume was low, nobody was impacted. Well, thinking of the whole nature of how everything was going to go, but then things change. Things change.
But I mean,
then, at that time,
was it really the case that nobody was impacted? Because
initially, yes.
From the 15th September, was it really the case? Because farmlands were already starting to flood at that point.
Yeah.
You know, where the people may not live there, but their livelihoods were in those areas. So the VRA just neglected the impact of the water they were spilling on the people.
But these were all people in the flood zone. And that's where I want to blame VRA, not current VRA, the whole VRA over the years. When VRA knew that one day they will spill, and when you spill, the flood zone, based on the EPP, certain areas will be inundated. Why didn't they make sure that nobody was living in those areas till this happened? So that's why I say VRA also have to be blamed in a way.
Okay.
Okay, because whatever shows you that if you spill X amount, A, B, C, D area will be inundated. Okay, of course, nobody should be there. But over the years, probably VRA should have sat down with the assemblies to do what we are trying to do now, to enforce the no permanent structure in some of these flood zones. This should have been done way back.
I see. And so, again, it brings me to the point, again, from this report, when the report identifies that there appear to have also been distrust between the people and VRA. So people did not take seriously what the VRA was telling them to move to higher grounds and the likes. What do you think may have caused that distrust over the years from your engagements?
Your spillage depends on inflow, depends on the rainfall. If the rainfall pattern changes all of a sudden, you might have to curtail your spillage. VRA has gone to these communities over the period to tell them, and there have been a number of instances that VRA might have gone to them, we're going to spill, and then no spillage. So when you come again this time and tell them you are going to spill, human nature, wait and see. Human nature, wait and see, and then nothing happens. And then, unfortunately, the October incident came and they have to spill more.
But was it not more because, look, you're asking me to move from my home to higher ground. The question will be where?
Where that's what one of the recommendations. Where means a safe haven, okay, which were not adequately prepared. But now we know that as a challenge. But then the important thing was move, and your life is more important than wherever you are moving to. So the where to move to, well, areas have been identified, but not properly prepared, and we've recognized that. Probably, not probably, going forward, all those areas where anybody will be moved to will be properly and adequately prepared. But then going forward, in the flood zones have probably been demarcated, and make sure that nobody stays in those areas. Especially some of the, there are a few islands downstream. They're supposed to move out of the place. Because the moment you spill about some volume, those islands becomes submerged.
So which means that as a country, we have to look at taking people to higher ground and providing them proper shelter.
Definitely.
Is that already in the works? Because
that is in the work. Because going forward, what we recommended was that if for nothing at all, this exercise is to identify the flood downstream, and then to also have in mind that we could spill volumes 37% more than was spilled in 2023. We're looking at in the short to medium term, we should be looking at 1 in 50 year volume of spillage. And in the long term, look at 1 in 100 years. These are normal things which are done for big dams like what we have. So downstream, you should be looking at 1 in 50 years volume of spillage, and then make sure that nobody stays in those areas. And as a result of the EPP, emergency preparedness plan, all these maps are there. And I think VI has also gotten some app now, a software and application which they will share with their communities. So when they tell you X amount is being spilled, you should be able to know that this area is going to be submerged, this area is going to be submerged. So there's a lot which should have been done years back, which now I can see them trying to take responsibility to do.
Another thing that caught my attention is that while the previous administration had taken steps to provide shelter so that people can move upstream, your report indicated that you could not get any details on that.
When the incident happened, some people's houses, especially the fishermen who stayed in mud houses around the place, a lot of them houses were demolished, okay, and were moved to temporary shelter, and then of course state housing, I mean through the Ministry of Works and Housing, have put up some structures, and some of them have been moved. When we went there, and that was less than 2 years, after 2 years after the incident, some were still staying in the tents, and of course we had done some structure for them, and they said they didn't have enough for adequate privacy. So we sat down with them together.
I just want to read the report. If you want to follow me, you can go to page 57 of the report, which says the committee noted that the Ministry of Works, Housing and Water Resources had initiated the resettlement projects in the various affected communities. However, reports on the status of the project were not handed over to the committee as of the time of submitting the report. The committee further noted from the budget and discussions with the communities that the then government had initiated efforts to resettle the displaced persons affected by the spillage. I'm cutting it short. Works had commenced on constructing some 1,000 housing units at Central, North, and South Tongo. Did you visit these places to verify?
We couldn't go to those locations.
So we cannot say for sure if those projects really happened.
Well, talking to the MCEs were not in place there, but there are coordinating directors who were there. Although we talked to the one in North Tongo, they told us that they've been there. Some of them have started, not completed. So we took their word for it. So, I mean,
then your recommendation to the government of the day will be to continue those projects?
Yeah, continue those projects and finish. Some of them were a bit reluctant to move to wherever they were going to be put. But then the challenge is that at that particular moment, where to get the land probably free became more important. So some chiefs voluntarily gave land out, and then they built these things. So the question of convincing some of these fisher folk to move there, and what we told them was that, look, you can go back to the river anytime and fish, but don't put up any permanent structure. So when you're told to move, you move. You could have your wife and children in this structure that are being built for you, okay, so that you can live in both locations, because spillage will not be done every day. There are times that, I mean, from the cycle of inflow season, from July to October or November, that's when probably the inflow comes. So you will not see anything between October to the following year, June, July.
So how do you suggest that the government goes around the issue of the cultural differences, because you move a community from here to another place? And in fact, one of the respondents alluded to the fact when they said that they didn't want to move because they will have two chiefs in one community, because one community will be moving to the other place. How do you suggest that government goes around those cultural and traditional issues?
Well, I'm sure there are experts who can help us address that. Because here we are, you are in a flood zone. And of course, probably because they haven't seen this magnitude of spilling before.
Right.
So, they are telling us this, nothing will happen. But having seen it this time, probably when they are approached, they will move. They will move. Because there's one village that is near Adidome. There's an old Bakpa or something.
Yeah.
Yes. And there's a new Bakpa. The old one, they relocated one of the island communities already. There's another small one where the people really want to move. But right now, I'm sure having seen what happened, they will definitely move. And government will have to come in. And it takes the collaboration of the MCE, the MPs, and everybody. And we need some social scientists to also let them appreciate and understand what it is. Because today we've been able to spill this, we've been able to manage.
Right.
Tomorrow it could be worse than that. But then we don't want to run a situation where we are spilling twice what was spilled 2023, and then we have people living down there.
The report also identifies the trooping of politicians, NGOs, and all the likes to that place, post the floods, as a reason, the communication broke down between the agencies. How is that? Explain how you came to that conclusion.
It's just unfortunate because during that period, the areas concerned, you have a government in place. The minister is from a different party. The MCE is on a different party. The majority of the people. So we realized there was some challenge with that, with communication. A
breakdown in coordination.
Coordination and communication. But with what happened and having met them and met the chiefs is something that and I think I must commend a lot of the chiefs. Like the chief in BP, for instance. Oh, well, excellent man. The chief in Adidome. Look, a lot of them took people into their own homes. They took charge of the whole thing, even though they were MCs and all these things. And that's the good thing about the nature of the Ghanaians. And I must commend them, take this opportunity to commend the people. Besides what people were relocated, in Adidome, for instance, they had a safe haven somewhere. But majority of the people were housed by those who were already living in the areas which were not flooded.
I see.
Majority of the people stayed with people.
The goodwill of the people.
Goodwill of the people. Those were also telling us that if we have to pay compensation, they should also, because somebody came to stay in their house for even 6 months, they fed them and everything, which for me it was very, very heartwarming. Okay.
Yes. Now, let's run through a few of the things. NADMO has been fingered a lot in this report for the lack of preparedness. But my question about NADMO's lack of preparedness goes back to the VRA, because I recall that post the flood, I think maybe 2 weeks into the flood or so, VRA then decided to put some 20 million CD funding into flood relief assistance for the victims. And yet, in this report, goes around to blame NADMO that NADMO didn't have the needed resources to be able to provide relief items for the people. On hindsight, should the VRA have provided that much? Should they have taken that responsibility from the get-go and provided that money for NADMO to be able to get ready for an incident of the sort?
Well, on the hindsight, yes. Prior the timing of the provision of that money too. NADMO per se, as an institution, is also has to be ready at any time to
No, I understand.
Yeah, but VRA, I don't know the timing of the provision of that 20 million. Probably was not at the time that it was needed. It came, it might have come a bit late. But what we also know.
I guess what I'm trying to ask is, should the VRA hold financial responsibility anytime they want to spill and the spill is likely to affect people? Should they prepare themselves financially to take responsibility?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. This is a national issue. The VRA, I don't think, is supposed to bear the full cost of whatever insight has to be done downstream. This is the government responsibility. Of course, VRA is a government institution. They also have to play part, but we can't hold VRE directly responsible, because when it comes to management of the flood and its after effect downstream, you hold the assemblies. They are NADMO. They are supposed to have people well trained, well resourced in the various locations to take care of these things. But that was not there. But then we've learned our lessons as a nation.
Lessons have been learned. Let's talk about compensation quickly. Yes. You say that the data you need for the compensation needs to be audited. NADMO didn't collect the data properly.
If you're going to pay money, I mean, we've had this discussion among ourselves. But let me before I even go on and commend the team which was put out by the minister to work with me. Engineer Koffi used to work with VRE, Engineer Akosombo, who works with BPA, Weapon Authority, lawyer Kwame Jantua, and then lawyer Emefa Fuga. They did an excellent work, working day and night to make sure we delivered this report on time. Now, talking about compensation, we have come up with a guidelines. But we think if you are, we don't expect anybody to just take our guidelines and then 100% just go by that. Whoever is going to disburse the money, I think we even recommend that Minister of Finance should take care of the disbursement of the money and whatever. Probably we're not too sure whether if you go and give, let's say, 200 million cedis to NADMO, it can be done adequately. Whoever is also going to dispense or take care of the compensation, we definitely have to review whatever we are suggesting. We receive reports from the communities, we receive reports from NADMO. 102 communities were impacted, 39,300.
But there were discrepancies, were there not?
Not too much. Not too much.
And that is why you are calling for the audit?
Yeah, no, whoever is going to pay, we want to be very, very sure. Because not everybody, probably there could be people who might have been impacted, who might not have been captured in the report.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. That if you are going to pay money, we have done some work by recommending that compensation should be paid. But then go back, look at our figures, look at NADMO, meet the chiefs, and then you can then start the process. And we recommended a number of things. Get an officer who evaluated everything. Minister of Finance had to be involved. But luckily, the government working on trying to work on its own mandate had already put up a committee to do the compensation. Right. I think the chairman of that committee.
But now you are recommending a proper structure to be able to compensate people properly. My worry is that your demands of the evidence of destruction of people's livelihoods or homes. It seems too high for people who have been affected by floods. Because if you're asking me to show proof of my proof of my business income, show proof of my business ownership, when floods have destroyed everything I own, I can't find it at that time.
Yeah. Well, if you go through the report, well, for people, a lot of these are not big time. For the big time fish farmers or whatever, they should be able to have some record. But for the small farmers or whatever, his canoe and fish nets. We're recommending that can they give some flat rate to some of these small farmers or whatever.
And what would be an appropriate flat rate? What would be an appropriate standard, which is what you call it, standard flat rate for people who have lost their livelihoods?
The figures, we debated on this, but we think let's leave that figure to probably the team who would be doing the disbursement, because they would then probably have an expert who would say that, and this is not the first time people are going to be compensated for a loss of property. Right. And people who have done that through NADMO or through the government itself will have an idea of how to compute that. We didn't. Our committee, of course, we didn't have that. But we'll
see how that plays out.
Yes, we gave a whole list of
things to look at.
To look at, so that we don't want anybody to be left out.
But engineer,
we even included grievance resolution.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we try to come up with all these things.
And I agree. I comment that this report is very, very in-depth in terms of, the compensation package and how we arrive at it. But engineer, this report also does not hold anybody accountable. So we are looking at this, but we don't see, who is being sanctioned? Why didn't the report recommend any sanctions?
Sanctioned in a way, I believe the terms of reference were given. And let me say, we're looking more to a prevention of a future occurrence. It could happen. You want to be as careful as possible. If holding somebody responsible today will prevent the future occurrence, probably yes, we will. But it's not that clear cut. That's why, for now, and I said, from where the president sits, is given a job to be done, a report has been submitted, let's enforce the report. Tomorrow, if something happens, I can hold you responsible. So
today, based on your engagement with all the stakeholders, 2 years on, if a flood occurs again right now, in those areas, would they be able to do any better?
I think for the past 2 years, there have been some level of work so far, except the engineering solution in some of the areas. In some of the areas, peculiarly like Mepe, for instance, a lot of the areas we are flooded were not by the
so we'll still have floods?
No, I'm coming. A lot of the areas which were flooded were not areas that near the river. They have creeks, and the water, because the water level went up, it found its way into the towns. And so with that, now they know that certain areas will be inundated if they have to spill some level of volumes. So, of course, if a place will be flooded, and for the flood for now, not until we put up the engineering solutions at Mepe.
It will happen again.
Yeah, and for Mepe.
And our response will be the same because NADMO still doesn't have money.
No, engineering solutions, I believe VI has already started.
Oh,
what I'm saying is that, you see, some areas are not by the distance. It goes all the way. We went there, far away from the river. But then you need to put up an engineering solution which will prevent the water from the lake going back.
Have you presented the report to the president yet?
To the minister.
To the minister?
Yes.
Oh, I see. I mean, so top 3 things you would want the president or the minister to take note of from your reports. Top 3.
The top three. 1, the flood zone had to be enforced.
Right.
Because what we spilled could be spilled again. 2, and then enforcing the flood zone, we've also indicated that we should, in a short to medium term, prepare for flooding up to the magnitude of 1 in 50 years, which will be about 37% of what was spilled in 2023. Okay, and then we take the compensation. People living in some of these areas who were affected have been compensated, and we make sure the flood zones are properly protected downstream and upstream.
Okay.
So that tomorrow, the level goes up, will not run into this problem. And VRA also have to equip themselves more so that they can predict a bit more accurately how much water will come in, so that they can take the right decision, in which case it doesn't increase the challenges downstream.
Engineer, I appreciate your insight on the subject matter. Thank you so much for talking to us.
You're always welcome.
Engineer Kirk Koffi.
Happy Mother's Day to you and to all our mothers.
Well, thank you.
Who have nurtured us to what we are today. But for them, I'm sure things would have been different.
Thank you.
Mother's Day to all of you.
Thank you so much. Engineer Kirk Koffi is the chairperson for the committee that investigated the Akosombo and Pond Dam spillages that led to flood in surrounding communities. He's also former chief executive for the Volta River Authority, so you can understand his knowledge on the subject matter. If you are intrigued by the report, it's available on 3news.com. My name is Kemenia.